Here we go. Recording in progress. Matt Wheeler is here.
Recording in progress.
and is here to answer your questions. After a few technology hiccups, we're
Oh my
smooth
God.
sailing from here on out.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we starting with the socks?
We can start with the socks. We it's kind of tradition. We have to. Okay.
So I am years ago I started wearing socks. Or no, I've always worn socks, but I
I
stopped
was going to
wearing my
say
shoes.
probably even when you were
Yeah.
an infant. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm now people started calling me the shoeless therapist, and so now I get to show off my fun socks. And if you want, you can follow me on Instagram at the shoeless therapist. Can you see these?
Oh, those are good ones for Halloween. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
These
Those are
like
good.
random crows. And funny enough, I don't know why, there's just like or crows or something, but
Ravens.
there's,
They look like ravens to me.
oh, you're right. They're
Yeah.
ravens. And they
Yes.
have like a little, occasionally there's a little worm, which just
That's what
cracks
the
me
pink
up.
thing is. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I'm
Cool.
I'm guessing, but I'll tell you, I get the most random socks. Like I had duck socks that it looks like the duck has a pair of pliers in its mouth. So
Hmm.
at this point, yeah, no, it's weird. I don't know. So those are my fun Halloweenish socks.
And so, topic wise, what do you got for us today?
Okay, topic. Okay, so I was thinking about it. I think one of the most important skills for a couple or an individual in any relationship to have is to slow down the conflict while it's happening and to stay present. Um, I have found that it only takes one person to really slow down the conflict. And I can slow down the conflict, and you can keep amping it up, and I can slow it right back down. And eventually, what I've found in almost all situations, it feels like if I can stay slow and calm things and like calm things down in a sense, you'll eventually join me. There are times where people are just that really it's unmanageable, but for the most part I've found that it's doable. So I'm going to kind of walk you guys through some of the steps into slowing it down. um Within myself, in order to slow it down, I have to a lot of times I just have to take a breath. I have to take a deep breath. I often, and it's funny because if clients were paying attention to me, which I hope they're not, because in session I want them to be focusing on themselves, but if they were paying attention to me, they would actually see that I do this even with them on a regular basis, where I'll hear something and maybe I'm not understanding, maybe I'm a little unsure, and I'll take a deep breath. Sometimes I'll look off to the side and I'll go, huh, all right, let me think about that for a second. Let me try and slow down and take in what you're saying. um and what I will often do is I'll often ask a question. Okay, well, that, and I'll say, hey, that's interesting. That's a different perspective I hadn't heard yet, and so it's really good to hear that, right? And then let me ask a question. Now, oddly enough, if I'm actively doing this with my partner, I think that so that's the step that's going on inside of me. The first step that I'll say to my partner is I'll say, hey, you know what? I think we're in a bit of a cycle. This to me feels like we're moving into a little bit of a conflict. And the first thing I'm gonna do intentionally to my partner is to actually say, hey, we're in the middle of a conflict at this moment. I can feel it. Can you feel it too? Right? So I might ask my partner that. Um, are you noticing it? Because if we can both claim our move, if we can both own where we are in that step, that in and of itself helps us go, oh, that's what's happening right now. Um, I'm trying to think of a good example. Um, there was a time where came into a room and there was a leak under the sink or whatever, and like my brain could not function fast enough to figure out, oh, turn the valve off under the sink or whatever. The first thing I could think was to run out of the house and shut the valve off to the entire house, if that makes sense. Now,
Mhm.
it's funny because in moments when something is happening, we are so used to a quick reaction that sometimes we shut the water off to the whole house. Now, in that situation, is that bad? Not necessarily, right? But sometimes we don't want to do that. It's like, okay, let's figure out what's happening. Let's shut the water off to this sink. And then I'll go turn the water on to the rest of the house. And then I can assess what's going on. And what we're doing when there's conflict in a relationship is that similar thing. Like sometimes we got to shut the water off to the house. Like I need a break. Like let me go for a walk. Let me take 20 minutes. Let me come back, right? The key is to come back. But when we shut that off, it's coming back to go, okay, let's take a look at what this actual problem is. And claiming our own move is actually that next step of, hey, you know what? When you said this thing, when you said that I was a liar, I wanted to yell at you and tell you that you need to stop telling me I'm a liar, right? And so, but I realize that if I do that, I'm not honoring your hurt. So now I've slowed the cycle down, and I'm saying to you, um, this is what I want to do, and it always injures you when I do this, right? Or it frequently injures you. And so I'm telling you, um, I don't want to hurt you. And I know that this is what happens. Can we slow this down? Can we talk about what? And then my partner, if they're in a healthy space, they are essentially, you know what? You're right. I call you names. I call you a liar. I know that that's hurtful for you. I'm in so much pain right now. It's where I go every time. And so the quicker that you and I can claim like our bad behavior, it's ownership, it's accountability. And the faster you're going to tune into me, if I own my bad behavior, you own your bad behavior, then we're gonna go, oh, okay, hold on, we're both trying to work together here. Let's figure out what the right behavior would be. um, and then I can go to a softer place. Hey, I wasn't trying to hurt you, although I can see why it does. I was trying to actually get close to you, but I can see that when I argue, it doesn't work that way, right? Like it's tuning into, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling lonely. You want to go to that soft spot as much as possible. One of the hardest things to do is that next step, where I own how I impacted you. And it's funny because I'm like, did I already go through this with you recently, Tammy? I can't remember.
Keep going. Like there's like you're coming at all of this from a certain perspective, and this is really helpful. It's like a process. So
Yeah,
so keep
totally.
going. Yeah, yeah.
But basically, when I teach people this, the biggest thing that gets in the way for all of us is that if I say to you, um, I know that when I call you a liar, that you feel attacked and you feel like I'm telling you you're not good enough. What I usually want to do is get defensive. Well, I called you a liar because you have lied to me. And that's not the point. It's obvious lying has occurred in the relationship. One person maybe much more than the other, if that makes sense. It's not about arguing if lying has happened. It's about how I impact you, how I shape your feelings. So what we do is we shut down and want to argue about my intentions or your intentions. And what we want to do is talk about when I call you a liar or when I lie to you. I know it makes you feel crazy. Even if that's not my intention, I know it makes you question your reality. It makes you wonder if anything I've ever said to you is true. It makes you wonder if you can ever trust me again. And if I'm lying about this thing, what else am I lying about? So if you hear the way I'm trying to walk through this, when we talk about how we shape each other's feelings, we're actually just validating each other. So imagine if I as a partner lie to you and then I'm able to go, you know what? Oh my gosh, I totally did it. You know, I I uh I told you something that wasn't true. I was scared and I shouldn't have done that. And now you question your reality and you wonder about all the things I might be lying to you about. This probably makes you feel crazy. So now I'm talking about and owning, this is how I shape your feelings, whether I mean to or not. That calms a person down, right? That slows your partner down and they go, oh my gosh, you get me. And so as we, and I'm telling you that learning how to slow conflict down really is one of the most important things, because when we slow it down, we can figure out what we have to work with. We can figure out how we injure each other and how to then nurture each other. A mistake that people often make is, if you love me, you'd never hurt me. And that's not true. Because I love you, I'm in a position to hurt you. And so I teach people the key is to actually just slow down and start to acknowledge, oh, I didn't understand how I hurt you until you just explained that to me. Well, that makes sense. No wonder why you're hurt. I can see how that hurts you every time. Man, I have such a bad habit there. It's going to take me time to learn how to not do that. And then ultimately, lastly, we start to share supportive emotions with each other. So I'll go through it real quick. Step one, you got to see the spiral and you got to call it out. You got to slow it way down. But I know for me, I have to see it within myself before I start telling my partner. And I've seen people do this where they're like, "Oh my gosh, we're in a fight. You're causing a fight." And it's like, "Oh no. Oh my gosh, I feel the nervousness welling up inside of me." And this is what the start of a fight usually feels like for me. What are you feeling? So call it out, see the cycle, see what's going on within yourself. Number two, claim your move. Own your bad behavior. Even if you haven't done it yet, tell your partner, oh my gosh, this is where I now start raising my voice and telling you that you're wrong. So that's me claiming my move. Step three is claim my softer emotion or my raw spots. I'm feeling fear. I'm feeling loss. I'm feeling abandonment. This is where Troy loves, all Troy loves stuff around the attachment wounds is so good. And so I claim that softer, more vulnerable raw spot. Step four is I own how I shape your feelings, how I impact you as my partner because I love you so much. And then step five is we now collectively share those softer emotions where we understand each other. And again, I don't have to agree with you. I can just go, oh, I understand you. You make sense to me now. I still wouldn't handle it the way you do, but I see it. So there, that's me going through it twice. Faster.
No, and I appreciate that. I was thinking though, like when you were talking about like going, oh, you know, I'm feeling like we're, you know, starting a bit of a cycle. I know this happens. Like, what happens if you get I'm fine, you know, And I'm thinking this is probably the addict going, I'm fine. I don't know what's wrong with you. Like, so how, seriously, but like, think of how shut down and how dismissive. So any thoughts on how do you deal with that?
If somebody says I'm fine, I don't know what's wrong with you, I might say, okay. Now if it's a client, right, what I'll say to them is, I wonder how often you feel fine and you're not noticing the storm brewing.
Oh,
Right? Like that in and of itself is slowing down, right? Like, I wonder how often I feel fine and you are noticing something probably well before I do. And so maybe you're a better gauge of when we're getting into conflict than I've realized. And I actually am oblivious and I think everything's fine.
it would be interesting the pattern too of like, I'm always fine, but everybody around me is like, like
Right.
there's something going on, like the claiming the the behavior. Like I used to have a wicked sarcastic tongue, and my husband, bless his heart, was brave and said, I can handle almost anything but your sarcasm. And like it was like this full stop. I was like, I so value that he was willing, to share that that particular trait was not working for him. And I had a moment where I could either work on that, or I honestly, I don't think he would have been able to hang on, hang out for the long haul, but his willingness to share, this isn't working, and stepping into that spot. And he did it in a really, calm way. He wasn't like, you're always, he didn't blow up at
Yeah,
me because
yeah.
I would have gotten defensive, because I would have gone, well, there's a reason I would have done something
Yeah.
snarky and terrible, but like his ability to share in a real and meaningful way, like I was able to take that in and go, wow, this is important, message received. And I care about the relationship, so I'm willing to go to my softer side and go like, okay, I need to look at this particular behavior for me. Why am I doing, I figured all that out, there was a reason, and it's a it's a funny but aggressive, like there was always a knife at the end of it. And it's not kind. What I did also learn with that was, when I quit doing it with him, I quit doing it. It
Oh,
changed my
interesting.
relationships with other people. I didn't pull out the sarcasm, so it
Yeah.
was an opportunity for personal growth in relationships in a much more expansive way. So what my point with all that is, if I'm learning to do this in a really meaningful relationship with the person I care about the most, like I can improve all of my relationships, as I'm willing to take ownership of my behaviors.
Yeah, but and what I love what you point out there is how he was able to see something happening before it happens, and he was able to come to you and address it. Like one of the things I've noticed is that it's interesting because a theme that I see a lot is where one person will say, I want to bring this up with my spouse, but things have been good lately. And
Yeah.
and I and I'm I've actually sat with this a little bit and I'm like, that's actually the time to bring up an issue, because it's like, hey, I'm nervous. So now I'm claiming what's going on inside of me. I'm nervous because I want to bring something up because I want to work through it so that we can be closer. But I'm nervous because things have felt so good and so connected, and I don't want to create conflict. Keep in mind, the conflict isn't being created, it's just been sitting underneath for weeks, months, years, right? And I'm trying to address it when things are calm. But I'll give you an example. The time to prepare for a hurricane is
Is not when
not
it arrived.
when
Yeah.
it's arrived, right? Like you get a warning that it's coming, and it's like, hey, let's talk about this. Things are calm. Let's go buy what we need. Let's get out of Dodge. Like whatever it is that needs to be done, right? We do it when things are calm and reasonable and feasible. And but it takes courage. And so for your husband to come to you and say, hey, can we talk about this right now? Right? He didn't bring it up. It doesn't sound like, maybe he did, but he didn't bring it up after the sharp tongue. He said, hey, your tongue is sharp at times. Can we talk about that?
Yes. And I don't remember, I just remember going, I mean, I had this like, whoa, that's a really big one, you know? So I honestly don't remember the whole context. So
Right, 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 right.
I can't affirm.
Well,
I
how about,
really no
well,
reminder on that one.
but
This was
regardless,
decades ago. Yeah.
the most effective time is is often when things are calm. It's
Yes.
a whole lot easier to slow conflict down when you're stepping into it by choice, as opposed to, well, I'll just wait for the problems to arrive. And it's like,
And it never goes well. You know, like we know this is going to happen again. So it's like I say this: the time to do this is when, you know, when you're not in the conflict, because then you actually have your thinking part of your brain, you know, working rather than the
right.
reaction and defensive and all of those negative things that just keep putting you back in that
Yep.
same old pattern, which is
But
destructive.
but stereotypically, the person in the relationship who tends to bring up all the conflict, which tends to be the pursuer, um, they get tired because they're like, man, I always bring it up. And every time I bring it up, it just turns into a fight. And so this is where I'll say, hey, withdrawers, those of you who are more conflict avoidant, you're gonna do a whole lot better for your relationship if you're able to say, hey, I'm wondering if we could talk about a conflict right now. I don't want to. I'd rather, things have felt really good. I'd rather just avoid it. You know my history of avoidance, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So anyway, it's not easy, but I think these steps are awesome as you guys implement them.
Well, and I always, you know, I say this all the time too. What is the goal? You can keep doing that same problematic pattern for decades, or you can go, I'm willing to change. I'm willing to be the one that's brave and says, you know, can we talk about this? Or I'm starting to feel this. Or like you're saying, let's talk about it. Like when we start to feel this, you know, the first one of us that notices is going to say, hey, I'm starting to feel this. You too. Like you can script that, you know, part
Oh
of it
yeah.
and go, hey, and then you also have, you know, then there's kind of that invitation to go, this is going to happen and we've talked about it, so we know we're going to go, okay, let's take a pause, you know.
Yeah, think meta. Don't fight, talk about the fight. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
Talk about how the fight usually plays out. Talk about how the fight makes you feel. So instead of fighting, talk about the fight.
Mhm. So we have a whole bunch of questions, so we're going to get to
That's
those.
excited.
I know. What should we do if we're not experiencing our spouses in good recovery? Not acting out is not enough. I agree. But it also doesn't say how long this has been. So, you know, if you're in very early in this stage, like recovery is a 2 to 5 year process. So if you're like, you know, you just found out, you know, a couple weeks ago, that's very different. So, but what are your thoughts? Like, how do you take
What
care of
do we
yourself as a
do?
spouse?
This is a, I think, an amazing question, because everybody has to figure out what they're gonna do, and sometimes it's, for right now, I'm going to focus on my well-being and my growth, and I'm going to be building up my support system, and in some sense, our support system as a couple, because it's not you versus them, if that makes sense.
It's been
And
2.5 years, by the way. So we
oh,
now have that.
okay.
Yeah, that changes things. Thanks for
It
sharing
does.
that.
It absolutely does change things, because
Hmm.
there are times if I'm working with an individual, I will ask, if things never change, if this is the most recovery they ever do, is this doable for you? Right? Like there are times where I will sit a partner in that space and say, is this, is this, is this enough? Is this are you comfortable with this being your life? And so to some degree, I have to figure out within myself, in my circumstances, and every single one of us is going to be different, whether we have kids, whether we are in a business together, whether we, no matter what the situation is, we have to figure out what's it worth. Now, I will, if it's me, I'm going to try to reach to my partner and say, hey, and I'll start it just like this. I want to have what is potentially a very difficult conversation to have, because I realize that I'm wrestling with some fear. I'm wrestling with trying to understand like what our future is going to look like. And I'm wondering if you are in a space where we could talk about that. Now, a lot of times they'll be like, why? What's going on? No, hold on. I'm wrestling with a lot of fear, and I'm wanting to make sure that you and I can talk about what our relationship kind of is going to be looking like moving forward. I'm wondering if you're in an emotional space where you could sit with me in that, right? Like, and they might try to push you to go further. I'm going to sit in that space until they're able to say, if they get upset, I don't understand why you do this. Right now, I'm going to slow down and I'm going to be like, can you help me understand what I am doing? Well, you always want to talk about things and it's always difficult, right? So then I'm going to try and slow down. Okay. So when I try to talk about things, it's difficult. That brings up fear in me that if we never talk about things, things are just going to stay the way they are. And I have to figure out, is that what I want? Is that what I need? So if you notice, I'm trying to slow that conversation down to keep it at a level where I can actually process the information. And at some point, let's say I do this conversation over and over and they never get to a space where we can have a deeper conversation. I might have to even just say that, like, man, it's really tough. When I try to have a deeper conversation, you seem to get upset. I'm trying to get close to you. Are you feeling attacked by me? If so, why? Right? So I'm slowing that down to figure out how slow do I need to go so that we can actually connect. And I've had some people that get to a space where they say, you know what? My partner doesn't ever seem to be able to connect. I do think a good couples therapist can help you guys on that. But I've had some people that say, man, I'm not sure they ever can. And I will say to them, how long are you able to stay in that relationship and still feel and get your needs met and get the fulfillment that you have? I hope that makes sense, but that's more of how I'm going to try and slow down and address that issue around. And if I get to it, I'm going to say, I'm struggling because I'm worried that your idea of recovery is really just sobriety. And although sobriety is really great and really helpful, I'm worried we're never going to get the emotional connection that I think you and I both want. And I would try and have that conversation in that way. But this is like, I mean, these are multiple conversations over and over and over and over again. So I don't know, Tammy, am I?
Yeah, that was really helpful. And Kristen Snowden in May did a should I stay or should I go? And again, zero judgment, just sharing resources. But there were 10 questions to journal about. And I think that's really helpful because you're going, not acting out is not enough. Yeah. And there's a lot, I've been around this a while. There's a lot of addicts that are going, hey, I'm not acting out. I'm good. So they kind of plateau.
And I will say, if you do that on the flip side, I've seen people who are still acting out occasionally or even sometimes frequently, and they're actually making really good recovery. Now, long term, we're not, that's not what we're going for, but somebody can be sober and not making progress in the recovery, and somebody could still be slipping and making progress in recovery. Now, again, every couple's got to figure out what works for them, but again, that's why sobriety can never be used as a tool of, well, look how recovered I am.
Yeah. Well, and not acting out, that's just abstinence. That isn't even sobriety. Right. So, and there's a lot of people that are, like, I want a gold star for not acting out. And I'm like, well, we weren't supposed to be doing that in the first place. So, we don't get a gold star for that. So
my favorite is that was not a sarcastic comment, but yet it was jabby. That was good.
Well, but it's just a logical. No, I can do sarcasm, but I'm tucking it away. No. Yeah. So yeah, no, I can, unfortunately. Yeah. My husband isn't doing his AVRs properly as he gets flustered. This makes me feel unheard and I disconnect from him. What can he do to help me in this situation? So I hear he's struggling and getting regulated. And I'm like, Matt, this is like slow everything down.
Yes. And so read either the last part of the question again or the whole
What
thing.
can he do to help me in this situation? Because so she's feeling I feel unheard and I disconnect from him. So
Um, well, the interesting part is he asking or are you? Right? Because if you're gonna go to him and say, here's what you need to do, right?
oh,
The
that's true.
reality,
Yeah.
I mean, the reality of it is that I would go to him and say, I would ask, hey, I've been thinking about a few things. When I get disconnected and pull away, if you're open to it, I can give you some ideas of how to show up for me in those moments. I would ask him that question. And most likely he's going to be like, okay. And then I would probably pause and say, well, if you're not open to it, I don't want to give you a list of things to do and make you feel like it's one more task. But you know, so, but so there's that little spin to it, but there's the other piece where I'm going to pay attention to if I disconnect and pull away, what am I needing? Um, so for instance, if I know my partner well enough that if she disconnects and pulls away, the more I try to push, the more it's like overwhelming. And so in that situation, I might say, hey, you seem to have pulled away. If you need space, I understand. I'm here when you're ready. Right. And so he could say something like that to you. Hey, I notice you're pulling away. If you need space, I understand. I just want you to know I'm here and I'd like to talk whenever you're ready. And then and then he waits. Now, for me personally, um, if I pull away, most of the time it's really nice when somebody says, hey, you've pulled away. I know you normally like a big hug. Would you like that now? Right? And again, we're asking questions. If you notice, there's a lot of consent going on, right? Like, what should they do? A lot of times it's slow down and ask questions and tell your partner, here's what I'm thinking. Can I try this? Are you willing? Um, the mistake too many of us make is we start to try and fix or show up for our partner without actually figuring out consent. And so, but when you say, what can he do? Well, you probably have to go inside yourself and figure out what's actually helpful to you. Spend some time thinking about it and then go to him and ask, are you wanting to hear a list of things that you could do? But I would be careful because if the next time he doesn't do it, you could be upset, or you could ask, hey, last time I gave you some things that I wanted you to do, you didn't seem to do any of them. Do you know why? Because we've got to figure out, why is he not doing them? And you might even ask him, when you had conflict growing up, what did you learn to do? And he might just be like, avoid, wait till it goes away. Right? It's going to be really hard for him to do something different without you guys practicing this over and over.
I'm going back to the first line where my husband doesn't do his AVRs properly. So he gets flustered. And I'm going like, I wonder if he's so nervous that you're, and again, I'm not there. I'm just picking up on this, but I was like, if I had to like, Matt, I have to do this right, because otherwise, you're going to be really upset. I will be less likely to do a good job of whatever. So go ahead.
No, I love that. What I'm going to do is, in a moment of calm, I might go to him and say, hey, I noticed when you're doing AVRs and you get, and all of a sudden my head's thinking AVRs, which that's acknowledge,
Something validate and
validate.
repair it. And why can't I think of the A right
It's
now?
okay.
But I
It's
will.
okay. Don't
Somebody
worry
will.
about it.
There it is. Yeah,
But
yeah.
but ultimately,
acknowledge, validate. Yeah. Yeah. Acknowledge,
yeah, I
validate.
knew
And
I did I said
yeah.
acknowledge and
Yeah.
validate. And I was trying to remember what the R is. Is it? But
Repair. Yeah. Yeah. Um,
but in that moment, or no, sorry, outside of that moment, I'm gonna go and say, hey, I've been noticing that you're trying to do AVRs, but you seem to get flustered. What's going on inside of you that you're getting flustered? Because that's confusing to me. So you're gonna try and drop into those moments for him, because if you notice where he's like falling, then just go sit in that space with him and just try to figure out if he can tap into that. But again, have the conversation in a moment of, if possible, in a moment of calm, instead of in the moment of him trying to use these tools. He's probably getting frustrated because he's like, this is a new skill set for me. I don't know how to do it. And which is fine. He just needs to keep trying and keep failing and keep trying. He'll get it.
yeah. But I was thinking it is a new skill set. And, like you're an expert bicyclist, but you did not start out when you first got your first little bike as an expert bicyclist. And so we do have to learn new tools. And this is like a foreign language that we are learning. And so, perhaps even inviting him to slow it down, where he's getting
Yeah.
flustered, or say, here's what I'm looking for, and have it be progress rather than nope. You're not gonna, you're not gonna get a check box. Like what is the goal? If the goal is we're making progress, working towards each other, what does that look like? For the two of you.
Yeah.
That was my thought though. Of like, I can imagine he's getting flustered because he's not doing it.
Well, and the
Completely
funny thing
right.
is, you talk about me riding bikes. I mean, I've been riding bikes my whole life, and a few years ago, I started riding with a group of guys who were faster, better than me, and there were a couple of those guys that I was like, "Hey, teach me what to do in this situation," and like I had to get even more help. And the reality of it is that every single one of us, we need to reach to other people and learn. He needs to, and again, you can't easily tell him to do this, but he needs to probably be practicing AVRs with guys that he's doing recovery with, and trying to get better at that skill set with people at work. The hardest person in the world for him to do that with is going to be you. And so he can practice with other people, including his own kids in a way, right? So anyway.
Next question. What kinds of things should an addict expect to do from discovery day forward so that they are trusted by the betrayed again? I feel as though my wife is never going to trust me again. And I am sometimes pulling away because I honestly don't like the version of her that is hyper vigilant and constantly questioning my behavior. Will it always be like this? And it kind of
Uh,
depends.
Yeah, it kind of depends. It's always possible. I mean, sure, anything's possible, right? That she doesn't end up changing regardless of how much you change, but I doubt that. I'm gonna say first and foremost, that comes to my mind is practice consistency. Practice, um, as silly as it sounds, like create rituals and routines of consistency. So we have a date night every week. I after I go to a 12-step meeting, I share with you some of the insights that I gained from it. As much as you can be consistent in your work schedule, right? Like when you create a ritual and routine, she starts to realize it can be expected, and it calms our nervous system when we know what to expect from the other person. As funny as it sounds, if you know that it's your job to take out the trash, then be so consistent at it that she learns that she can rely on you. And so that consistency of reliability is phenomenally important, especially in the small things. And that's one of those that's really interesting, because what I found is that somebody will be like, well, I lied, and it was about something stupid. And I'm like, yeah. Now, the hard part is in her brain, if you lie about something stupid, she immediately goes to, what are all the other things you're lying about? And so even in being consistent on, oh, hold on, I totally lied to you, right? I lied to you yesterday when we had this conversation. I've been thinking about it. So you get consistent on disclosing that. right? You get consistent on as many behaviors as you possibly can so that she starts to, like, she can measure time by you. And that consistent reliability does more to rebuild trust, in my opinion, uh, short of never lying, right? Getting rid of lies is like possibly the single most important thing. And then the consistency and showing her that you are just a reliable person. And so you're going to have to practice and learn that. Some of us have jobs that aren't consistent, that aren't reliable. So then where do we create the rituals and routines of reliability? And the more that you just continue in that reliability, that consistency, the more she's going to realize that you are a person who says what you're going to do and you do it uh, regularly. And that trust gets built. But unfortunately, there were so many years, most likely, of where there wasn't a consistency and stories changed and everything else that potentially was going on, that it's going to take a while. But I would say you lock it in. And I would also ask her, what things do you need to see from me consistency wise in order to feel that we're rebuilding trust? I know these things are most important to me, and I would have your list of what's most important to you ready and tell her those before you ask her, tell me everything, because you want to show her that you've put thought into it and you have awareness for yourself before you ask her to go give you your list of recovery, if that makes sense.
Well, and you were talking about lies, and lies of omission are still lies. There's
Oh,
lots of
totally.
people that, tell half truths, or, well, I didn't, I avoided that part. I didn't lie, but you left something major out, and and you know, you knew you were acting out all the time. Partners have discovery, and so their starting point starts here. You knew all along, for years or decades, that you were doing that. So it's a different timing process. Is she ever going to trust you 100%? No, she can't, because you have shown that you can be an untrustworthy person. Now, the more you do to build trust, then yes, it like, I know so many couples that have found a place that is more honest, in a much healthier place. They're having real communication. It isn't, this half truths and false things. So real recovery changes things. But I mentioned earlier, real recovery is 2 to 5 years of living this, integrating recovery into all areas of life. It isn't, well, I'm doing my recovery work and then I have life. It's like, this is all of it, where we're showing up with integrity consistently, not perfectly. Okay, the next one, Matt, is betrayed partner here. I'm working on rebuilding my self-esteem. How do I sort through the incongruence I feel internally between my values of needing a relationship that is honest, loyal, faithful, versus wanting to stay with my SA partner who's acting out when against all the values I hold? We are 20 years together, 3 years out. His recovery is shaky. Why do so many psychology books, podcasts outside of SA that help you self-examine tell you to walk away from these relationships? Do I have to somehow change my values to stay with them, or to keep my self-esteem in good standing? This is thank you. This is an amazing layered question. So let's unpack it one question at a time.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm trying to think of where to go. My first thought was to respond to, why do so many psychology books, essentially recommend leaving? And I think what all of us have to figure out is, oh gosh, it's the hardest thing to try and describe, but basically, what am I willing to live with? And what kind of life do I want to have, versus what am I going to lose if I leave? I think it's really unhealthy, and I've worked really hard as a clinician to never tell a client whether they should stay or go, right? Like, it's not a therapist's place to ever tell somebody that, because there's so many complexities to it and there's so many losses. And so I think, though, there are some times where the psychology books really push, and that's essentially, like if there's abuse, right? If there's abuse in the relationship, if the person isn't like showing that they can make change, then there are a lot of times where it's like, are you going to keep living this way? Um, I'm trying to remember the first part of your question where about it being against your morals and your values. It's difficult because a lot of times what you're grieving is what your partner never was. Meaning, I came into the relationship expecting this, and now I'm in this realization that I've got this, and I don't think you have to lose your values, but you have to, or your self-worth, but you have to figure out, why was my self-worth dependent on the behaviors of my partner? And a lot of that is, what was I taught growing up, right? Like a lot of times growing up, we're taught, if I'm a good person and I do well and I take care of other people and, I'm this type of a partner, then my partner is going to be this type of partner in return. And whether it's religion or it's our family cultures, or if it's our social culture growing up, it's the same thing I hear all the time. Oh, well, if my spouse ever cheated on me, I'd leave them. And it's like, you don't know what you do. And so sometimes what we're wrestling with is the new reality that we're in, and we're trying to figure out how to reconcile that paradox. The paradox is, this is what I always thought I was having or going to get in a relationship. This is what I ended up getting. How do I figure out whether I should stay or go? Well, this is a timeless question that keeps coming up for anybody, really. And I'm afraid I'm not answering your question, but I think that this is a wrestle that every person in recovery, even the person who has done the wrongdoing, if you will, has to figure out, is this the relationship I wanted? And did I end up justifying acting out behavior because it wasn't the relationship I wanted, and I could blame it on my spouse? Well, that's super messed up. And so again, I'm worried I didn't answer your question.
And the books, like, it's why we refer people to qualified professionals that understand this work, because this is different work than just general stuff. And
Yeah.
and I go, like, I don't think you have to sacrifice your value. I mean, I think that's a really good thing to journal about and talk to qualified people about, etc. But if you're, because you're in this paradox of, my value is I want to stay married to my spouse who I love, and separately he acted out, and those two things don't go together to align for your values. But your value is, I want to stay married to the spouse that I love, and I see his brokenness, I see the challenges that he has, I see that he's got really shaky. Now, for you, are there things you could do for your healthy boundaries that will help you, and maybe that he'll bump up against, so that he's more willing to do, a little higher level of work, so that he's on less shaky ground. And I know we've got lots of questions, and I'm like, for once, we've got so many questions and we won't get to all of them. And I apologize, but come back. But
you'll save them for next time.
I will. But one of the things I was thinking about is, people who are on shaky recovery, like, you don't get the full benefit of recovery if you aren't willing to do the work. I hear all the time, people are like, well, I'm going to one 12-step meeting a week and seeing my therapist. And I'm like, shaky, shaky, shaky. We're looking to change our lives. And the more we front load it and get a solid foundation, the more benefit we get. Living in recovery is so good. If I could wave a magic wand and every addict could see it, they would go, oh, I want that, and I'm willing to do the work. But they don't get it. They're fearful, all of those things. So the reasons are irrelevant. But I don't think it is that you have to live outside your values. I think you can hold my values.
Right.
I'm in this relationship, and I'm waiting to see, maybe the relationship is in safe harbor for now, but how would it be if your values are, I want to stay married, and then you divorce because now, he's doing these things like that. you're in a quandary because neither of those would, are really what you expected. But, Debbie McRae did a 2-part webinar on grief, and the grief of the loss of the husband you thought you had, the grief of the loss of the relationship you had, that's some powerful work, for you to do, and lean into the resources that are helpful, that will help you regulate, not the books or friends that are telling you, leave the bum, get rid of him, and then you'll be fine.
Yeah,
No, you'll
I
still
get
have to do the grief work,
yeah, I get nervous anytime, like, well, this book said I should, and it's
Yeah.
like, that book is probably giving you multiple ideas. Sometimes we read maybe a consistent theme, and maybe it's one of the things we're afraid that people are telling us. So that's a total challenge.
It is. Do we have time for one quick one? I have a meeting right after this too. So, but
If you have time, I can do it.
okay. So we're going to do this one. Okay. There are some questions that always cause an argument and never get solved. My husband just shuts down. I tried several different angles. How do you get around this?
That one, actually, I think I would start with, hey, it seems like there are certain topics that seem to cause us to go into a fight every single time. Do you know why that is? I noticed that you shut down, and that makes me sad, or that makes me confused, or that makes me scared. Do you know what's happening inside of you that you're shutting down? Because I know that I'm getting scared. Are you feeling me scared, and that's why you're shutting down? I'm literally going to go in, instead of listing off the things, I'm going to go say exactly what you said and see if that slows it down enough to have a conversation. And if it's like, if he says, well, which topics are you talking about? No. No, let's just talk about the fact that certain topics seem to always go this direction, and you and I don't ever seem to get on the same page. What do you think is happening that this continues to happen for us, right? It's kind of what I was trying to explain at the beginning, of like, just slow way down and have that conversation. It's really an insightful question, but most people, when I say, have you tried telling him that? They're like, well, no, because I just start talking about finances or sex or whatever it is. And I'm like, oh, no, don't go there. Just say, hey, there's certain topics. And you could even ask, what topics do you feel like shut you down every time? I know which ones I think. I'm curious, which ones do you feel like shut you down? And so now we're just talking about the fact that topics shut us down.
Yeah, I love that. I don't feel like I shut down anything. Well, yeah, I mean, like I can play this all out. I don't shut down, or like, we don't need to talk about anything or whatever. Like, there's lots of different answers but yet, like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, like, I know one of the things that happens is, if I shut you down, I don't have to deal with this, and I can just kick the can down the road. And eventually you'll probably get tired of even bringing it up, and you'll just drop the subject, and nothing ever gets solved. Now, that doesn't mean it makes it all better. It actually, leaves you guys in a big gap between the two of you. So, I also think, I love what Matt was just sharing too, but it's like, if our goal is to be in a relationship together, then, how do we do this in a way that is, good for both of us? Because unfortunately, sometimes they'll be like, well, it's good for me if we don't talk about any of this stuff, because this is just uncomfortable. And, I don't want to talk about it. No, but that doesn't solve anything. At the end of the day, we're disconnected, and we are not in a connected relationship that is truly beneficial, from all standpoints. There's all kinds of research about that we're in a better place physically, emotionally, all of these things. We work better individually if we're in a healthy relationship with the two of us. So, okay, I captured the rest of the questions. We will bring them back in 2
Cool.
weeks. So
If you wouldn't mind emailing to me, just in
I will.
case.
I will. Then we'll have them together. But yes,
Yep.
I got pictures, and Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the questions, and thanks for staying the patience and staying while we solve the technology issues. But
Oh,
you'll have a new
I'm so
computer next
grateful.
time. So
That's my plan.
bye, everyone. Thank you.